The brain is a highly complex organ making complex decisions and computations every millisecond. This is made possible by billions of neurons, each fundamentally different in the types of intrinsic dynamics they exhibit. Some exhibit leaky integration of currents with threshold-based spiking, and others exhibit even more complex types of dynamics such as threshold adaptation and after-spike currents. When we compare this to current artificial neural networks, or ANNs, that attempt to emulate the brain's computing powers, we find that although ANNs are very successful at tasks like image recognition and sentence translation, they lack biological realism and they lack diversity in neuronal dynamics. This raises the question of what advantage do the diversity and complexity of dynamics we see in the brain have? The goal of our research is to assess the role of complex and diverse dynamics in network computation by implementing them in ANNs. We start by developing a neuronal model that implements biologically realistic dynamics, namely leaky integrated fire dynamics and after-spike currents. This model can also learn parameters underlying these dynamics using gradient descent. We optimize a network of these neurons on a queued pattern generation task. In this task, networks receive inputs from a series of input sources, out of which only a subset is active during a trial. The network is trained to produce a sinusoid whose frequency is based on the input sources. We set up a network with a single recurrent hidden layer, which is initialized with no diversity. Over training, the network can learn both neuronal parameters in these neurons and synaptic weights. Indeed, this network was able to learn this task, and as shown here, it produced different frequency sinusoids based on the input. Interestingly, after-spike currents were required to learn this task successfully. We then characterized the diversity learned by the network. We first analyzed the distribution of each learnable parameter across neurons in the trained network, and we observed a diversity in both membrane-related parameters and in after-spike current parameters. Next, we presented each neuron in the trained network with constant input current and observed diversity in response types across the network. These two findings support that the diversity in dynamics was learned in this training and was beneficial to the network. In the future, we want to assess the biological realism of the learned diversity by comparing parameters learned by our model to those found in the brain. Thank you all for listening.